Oftentimes people ask about what did you eat, what did you drink? And so I'll mention that, a little bit of food and water. So water you can get from streams. Sometimes if you look, there's a little pipe here that has water coming out of it. This is actually a piped spring. They found a spring and installed a little Tyvek or a PVC pipe. And so I've filled up. This is about the most water I ever carried. I was getting ready to go into an area that had 20 miles without water. I don't show it here, but I filtered my water with a small filter just to make sure that there was nothing bad in it. My good friend Martha mailed me resupply boxes. And so before I left, I packed up a bunch of food. I figured out for like 4 to 6 days how much food I would need, and toilet paper and biodegradable soap and batteries, things I might need. And about every 4 days, she would mail me a package to the next town. And so I would hike, get off the trail at a hostel or a post office, resupply my food, get back on the trail. And so that's where I got most of my food. I did supplement a little bit at grocery stores. And anytime I went into a town, I would eat a huge meal at a restaurant or whatever was there. I ate a lot. You're burning 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day. You can't carry that much food on your back. And so when you go into towns, you have to make up for that. And there were times that I went into town and in like a 24-hour period ate about 10,000 calories. So it was fun. I would eat breakfast and dinner typically in my camp. But lunches, I always made sure to have a place with a nice view. And so this is an example of one place that I cooked lunch. I have my little jet boil stove right here with a fuel canister, and I'd boil water and rehydrate beans and rice and other types of things, spaghetti, and then enjoy it looking out at the view. Sometimes you'd be hiking along the trail and you'd come upon coolers or Rubbermaid containers, and they would have food in them. And so this is a case where they had sodas, and that's called trail magic. And people that live in the communities will come out and just leave these little stashes of trail magic, and it's just fabulous. You're walking along the trail, you're thirsty, you're hungry, you're tired of the food in your pack, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it is like magic. And so that was a really cool thing. Although one time, I have to tell you, you get trained to, anytime you see a cooler, you just go and open it. And one time I was hiking by a campground and saw a red cooler and got within about 10 feet of it before I realized there were people camping there. So you have to be careful with that. And sometimes the trail will give you food. Especially in Virginia and West Virginia, there were a lot of raspberries and blackberries and blueberries. And I mean, there were areas you could just walk along and eat all day and pick berries. And so those were really good. Of course, there was a joke because bears eat these too. And if you've ever seen bear scat, bear poop, it has a lot of seeds in it from the raspberries. And so some of my friends were saying that my bowel movements might look like bear scat. So I didn't look. I don't know. But I ate a lot of berries. Okay, so wildlife. This is not the kind of wildlife I really enjoy seeing. That's a rattlesnake. I saw 3 rattlesnakes. You can see it's got this little rattle up there shaking at me. It wasn't happy to see me either, so it was mutual. I did see 1 copperhead snake, so I saw 4 poisonous snakes total, not too many. Saw a lot of non-poisonous snakes, more than I could count. Here's a picture of a porcupine. That was in New Hampshire. And he stopped and looked at me and posed for that picture. That was nice. In the Grayson Highlands, they have wild ponies, and these are all along the trail. Really pretty area. And then in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, they have mooses. I have to tell you that I actually borrowed this picture from a friend. Every time I saw a moose, I was not in a position where I could take a picture of it. Twice, I set up my tent in what ended up being the middle of a moose path, which was really interesting. So what happens is at night you're laying there and you hear this, and then it stops right when it gets to you. It kind of goes a noise, and then it went around. And that happened, like 10 times during the middle of the night. But I became convinced after the first few times they weren't going to run over my tent, so I went ahead and slept. And then in the morning, I could see them walking by, but they were so close, and I knew my camera would flash if I took a picture, and I did not want to get stampeded. So I never took a picture of a moose, but I saw a lot of them. I saw 24 bears, and so this is 3 bear cubs that are up a tree there, and their mother was at the base of the tree. This was taken with zoom. I was not that close. And bears are actually hard to get a picture of too. I took a lot of pictures that I thought were of bears, and then when I looked at them there was just greenery and the bear was gone because they run pretty quick. But that was one where they had climbed a tree, so I was able to get my camera out and take a picture. So one night I was sleeping in my tent, and it had rained when I set my tent up, and so I had the doors and windows all closed, and I could hear something moving around the tent. And so I thought, well, the best thing is just to know what it is. And so I unzipped the door, rolled it up. It had stopped raining. It ran away, whatever it was. And then it came back. And so I'm laying there and I'm hearing it moving all around my tent. It sounded like multiple animals. And so I got my headlamp and I shined it out there, and it was bunny rabbits. So it's always good to know what you're scared of, I didn't get scared very many times on the trail, and that was one time that if I had not looked to see what it was, I might have laid there all night scared, and it was bunny rabbits. So one of the things that's really fun about the trail are the people. And so I'll just kind of go around. These are some of the people I met. This is a guy, his name is Between because he was between high school and college. And this is his mother, whose name was Mother Nature. And they were from Germany. There's actually a documentary that they show in Germany a lot about the Appalachian Trail. And so I think I met 20 different people from Germany on the trail. It's very interesting. But I particularly liked them. In fact, one of the 3 nights I stayed in a shelter, it was in this shelter here with them. And but Mother Nature, when we were hiking over all the rocks, would just shake her head and say, "This wasn't in the documentary." But they finished. This is a guy named Twisted. It was kind of a wet, cold day that day, so his nose was red. So all of these people were no-bows. And I hiked with Twisted a few days. He was a high school counselor that was retired. I guess Mother Nature was also a teacher in Germany. She taught English. This is a woman that had just gotten out of college. Her name is Temper. And not because she had a temper, but because she had worked in a chocolate factory when she was in college, and she had learned to temper the chocolate. So we hiked together a few days. This is Pa Burt. He was the retired chemical engineer, and we hiked together a number of days. He was probably one of my first friends on the trail. A really nice guy. This is Lucky, and Lucky is a retired newspaper investigative journalist, and actually I've heard he has won some prizes, that he's actually well known, but I don't know his real name, so I don't know who he is. In fact, out of all of these, I guess I know Twisted's real name and Temper's real name. These two, this is Brian and Mary Ellen, and they were doing PhD research in biology. And they were looking at erosion on the trail, and it was so much fun because I would see them day after day. We were moving along the same sections, and they were always so happy and fun that I'd start to see their little orange flags that they had set out for the research, and I'd start smiling because I'd know they were going to be around the corner somewhere. So a lot of fun people. So although I slept alone on tops of mountains most of the time, during the day I interacted with a lot of people. All right, next I'm just going to show you some things that I saw along the trail, some flowers and some views. Some of the Nobos talk about hiking with spring, that if they start out in Georgia and they hike at a particular rate, that everywhere that they hit, it's spring there, and you're seeing flowers. And I would say that the northbound section of my hike, I hiked with the lady slippers. I probably saw 4,000 lady slippers in the first 2 months. It was amazing. I thought they were rare, but I don't think that anymore. I saw mostly pink ones, but I did see some white ones. I never saw a yellow one, which I hear they are rare, but I just thought those were really pretty. So that was in Maryland. And then the lilies came into bloom. This was once I had headed back southbound. I believe this was in Virginia. And just gorgeous all along the trail. Also some really cool mushrooms. I think this is the type of mushroom that is in Mario Kart. If anybody has kids or has played that gives you special powers. And in fact, a number of people sent me links where I think it is one that gives you, like, it has hallucinogenic properties. Sometimes there were lakes. You'd just be hiking along and there would be a lake, and that was an opportunity to get cleaned up a bit and to cool off and enjoy the water. So that's me swimming. That's in Maine. And of course, there were awesome views. This was in Pennsylvania. And you'd be hiking through the woods, and then you would just come out to a ledge, and it would just be gorgeous. And so that was a lunch spot. That's where I would choose to eat lunch. And so there's another case where it's like you're walking through the woods, and all of a sudden you come out to an opening. And this is, if anybody saw the movie Walk in the Woods, this is actually where one of the scenes is in the movie. This is McAfee Knob in Virginia. And this is climbing up Mount Katahdin in Maine. So this was my last day in Maine. And so you can see the trail there. There's a white blaze there, and the trail essentially went straight up and over and then down the ridge. And that's probably about 2 miles from Mount Katahdin, the top. And there's the top. So this is the Nobos. When they get there, they're finished with their hikes. For me, it represented, I guess, kind of the emotional halfway point, although it was actually a little bit further than halfway. But that sign has a lot of pictures taken of it. When I was there, I had no idea how I was going to get back to Washington, D.C. I had 5 miles to climb back down the mountain and figure out how to get 3 hours away by car to Bangor, Maine, to fly back to Washington, D.C., to get on a train to go to Harper's Ferry. And I didn't know anybody. And like a half a mile before I got off trail, I met these 2 men that were finishing a section hike. And they just happened to live in Bangor, Maine, and offered to drive me there. And it was like, sometimes they say, in fact, I was told, don't try to plan. It will just happen. And I was a half a mile from finishing. It was like, okay, when's it going to happen? And sure enough it did. So that was like one of those best trail magic moments, because those guys put up with me, and I smelled pretty bad at that point. I had not had a bath in a number of days. So they were very sweet. And then when I summited at Springer, coming back south, I had a lot of friends that met me there. And those were a lot of my supporters and so forth. Let's see, someone you may know right there. You recognize her? She doesn't normally dress like that. Dr. Cowlett came up. And most of those people camped with me the night before, hiked with me. This guy's kind of interesting. He was my middle school band teacher. And his wife actually taught me high school chemistry. So he thru-hike the Appalachian Trail in 1997 and came out to do some trail magic when I was in Georgia and then was there at the end. So a lot of fun. I think that's the last one. All right. Any questions? Or thank you? Yes?
Did you see any skunks along the way?
I didn't. I smelled some, but only south of the James River. And so I don't know whether skunks don't live in the northern portion of the United States, but I thought it was really interesting because growing up as a child, we would go and hike in the Smokies, and the skunk smell was something I kind of related to being out in the woods on the trail, but did not smell it until I was in the South.
What was your pack weight?
My pack weight. So there's a few different ways to look at pack weight. The base weight, which is what you're carrying that's not consumable. So no fuel, no water, no food. My base weight was 10.5 pounds when I was going northbound. When I came back southbound, I actually sent my sleeping bag and my stove home. And so that dropped it down to about 7.5 pounds. Food and water, it depended on how many days. I don't know that my pack weight was ever over 25. And a lot of days it was below 15.
Did you only use dehydrated food?
Yeah, kind of. Protein bars, protein shakes, dehydrated foods that I ordered dehydrated foods in bulk and then made my meals. So I would add things together to make different meals. I made sure that I had each week 7 different dinners so that I wouldn't get tired of the food. And in the end, I only got tired of one meal, and it had a lot of Indian spices, and I think it was just, it was too much. But other than that, all of my other meals I enjoyed the whole time. As I started getting really hungry, they talk about hiker hunger kicking in. I would, like I said, go into towns and eat a lot. One time I sat down and ate a sour cherry and blueberry pie, the whole thing. I normally don't eat meat, but a lot of the towns didn't have vegan and vegetarian food, and so I actually one time bought a pound of pre-cooked bacon and ate the whole thing. I didn't even heat it up. So I was really hungry, and but ate a lot of good food. And so sometimes when I was in town, I would pack some of those things out. One time I tied a bag that had a box of 12 Dunkin' Donuts in it to the back of my pack. That lasted about 2 days. So, so those things weren't dehydrated.
How did you like your Sawyer squeeze?
I like the Sawyer squeeze was my filtration device. I liked the standard size. I did not like the mini. The flow rate's too slow. Nikki?
Yeah, how many pairs of shoes did you have to have? Did you just have one the whole time? Or did you
No, I went through 4 different pairs of shoes. I did not use hiking boots. I used trail runners. And so I actually, most of the time, wore a brand called Hoka that has extra cushioning. Although I did wear a pair of Solomon shoes for a while because that's what was available and I actually liked them. And then a pair of North Face shoes that I did not like at all. But it was the only thing the town had, and I had to have something. So, and while we're talking about shoes, if I have time to tell another story, one of the things that happens on the trail is people will drop things. And someone will find it and they'll like hang it on a tree or put it on a rock so that it's visible. And I had 2 pairs of socks and I was switching back and forth between the 2, and they're special socks. They're Injinji socks, so they have toes in them. And so you have a left foot and a right foot. And the right foot sock got a hole in it. And I didn't meet anybody else that wore the kind of socks that I wore. But I was hiking through southern Maine, this really difficult part of the trail, and came upon a rock, and there was a right sock, Injinji sock, the exact kind that I was wearing that was brand new, laying on a rock. And I picked it up and put it in my pack and wore it the rest of the way. So I think I ended up going through about 3 pairs of socks and 4 pairs of shoes. Yes?
What did you do to prep?
Well, nothing more than I would normally do, but before the hike I had been training for a 100-mile running race, and so I had been doing like 30-mile and 20-mile days back to back. So I probably didn't start out like the normal person would, preparing for it. The normal person should prepare. I wasn't normal. So, and that allowed me to do a number of like 30, 35-mile days. I started out with 20-mile days. And if you like read Walk in the Woods and some of the other books, most people start out closer to 8 miles a day. Any other questions?
Oh, thank you so much.